In this video we're just going to take a look at a few of the settings for XAMPP and the web server. What you have now, if you have these green, Apache and MySQL, is you have a web server up and running. The web server is on port 80 and the secure server is on port 443, although we don't use that. If we want to stop the service at any particular time, we just press stop. That will be necessary if you make any changes to your server, which we'll have a look at shortly. And again, if you want to stop the MySQL one and restart it, well, you just press stop, and you need to press start again to make it go. We'll take a look at these buttons down the side here, starting with the top one, config. This is going to configure your server in total. The first thing I want you to notice is this line where the editor is. It's saying if I open up a file and want to edit it from any of these buttons, which program should I use? Well, I've asked you to download Notepad++. It's a really good program, and that's the one that I want to use. So all you need to do, yours is probably saying Notepad or something different, all you need to do is click on the file folder at the side. It's going to take you there. Notice mine's already in the folder, but if you want to find it, it's normally local disk, program files, Notepad++, and then just click on the file and choose open, and that should appear in there now. So every time you click on some sort of configuration file or a log, it's going to open in Notepad. The other thing you need to do is make sure you've got these two boxes ticked, Apache and MySQL. So when your computer starts, or when XAMPP starts, I should say really, both your web server and your database will be up and running. If any of these are red, we have a problem, we need to sort it out. Perhaps you want to email me, find out what's going on, take some screenshots to let me know. So that's pretty much all we need to do in the configuration. If you're unsure, just make sure the settings are the same as mine. Let's take a look at the service and port settings for a second. This just tells you what your service is. Your web server is Apache. It's telling you what it is and what ports it's using. MySQL, your database, it's telling you what it is and what port it's using. These could be different. They don't have to be Apache and MySQL for your website, but the whole purpose of using XAMPP is to use these. FileZilla is a file transfer protocol, pretty useful at home, or if you're working in the office and want to transfer your files to home. Pretty useless in school because the school firewall tends to block anything that you want to send over the ports. So the main port for file transfer protocol is 21. Useful information for when you're sort of doing your exams or looking up things for revision. Mercury and Tomcat we're just not going to play around with at the moment. In fact, we're not going to play around with them at all. So that's your service and port settings. We're not going to bother with change language, user-defined files, or log options. We've done as much as we can under the configuration. So if you're happy with it, you click save. I'm going to click a book, so I don't want to upset my system with any changes that I may have made. The next thing to look at is the status of your network, really, and here we go. Clicking on it, it's telling me all the ports that are being used. So here we have port 80, and the program ID, you might notice it's the same as over here, and 4276 as well. This is telling me what port this particular thing is working on, and that is your web server. You notice Apache, but when a web server runs, the actual file name is httpd.exe. You notice we've got two of them down here. That one's port 443, so we know that that is our secure one. But this is telling you all the services that are running and on what socket they're using. You won't need to know too much about this, but if you haven't got things running, it'd be a good idea to take a screenshot of this so that I can see. For example, maybe you haven't got your web server running, I won't see these things appearing in here, and I can say, oh, well, you need to do X, Y, Z. Obviously, if you need to refresh it to find out what's running, you can just press refresh. Here we've got our MySQL, which is MySQL D. That's our database running. So we're going to close that window for a second. Next thing down is a shell. We shall hardly use the shell. It just takes us to a command line where we can type some sort of command line prompts in. I would be more tempted to actually run it from Windows rather than from here, but we'll probably use that once, maybe twice. Next one down is your file manager, Explorer. There you go. It's just the same as clicking on this file manager down here or choosing computer from your start bar. It's just a quick way of getting it if you have the XAMPP control panel open. If you don't, it'll be a bit of a pain. But what it does do is it drops you right into your XAMPP folder so that you can see all the items associated with XAMPP. XAMPP has a lot of programs with it as well. So for example, we've got FileZilla, which is a program. We've got Apache, our web server. We have got PHP. We've got MySQL. We've got PHP admin. Lots of programs in there, and this list can grow depending on what you decide you are going to run under XAMPP. But for the time being, we just need a very, very basic setup. The services, again, very useful. If we click on it, it's going to tell us what things are running in the background on our computer. We've got 2 versions of it. We're seeing all of them, which is the extended version, and we've got a standard set of items. This is telling us what is running. Again, you probably won't come here for any reason whatsoever other than to say, look, something's not working. Here's a screenshot. What's happening? All the services that are running, you can see, are started. You can actually change things here. This is for when your computer starts up, not when XAMPP starts up. So, for example, if you've got your web service, let's just take this one, a proxy. It's started, okay, it's running on the computer, but I have to start it manually, okay? We can change these things so that they can start automatically when the computer starts up. So, one way of, if you find that your web server isn't working, then maybe you want to change from manual to automatic. The other thing that we can have is stopped as well. So you might see stopped in there as a service. All of those can be got to also from Control-Alt-Delete and starting your task manager and choosing the services. There's nothing new there. Next thing I want to show you is the configuration files. I'm not going to bother with MySQL, but I am concerned with Apache configuration files. You can change how your web server works quite a lot by using these. If you get one of the settings wrong, your web server is not going to work at all, so I wouldn't play around too much with them. But certainly as your confidence grows, when you know what you're doing, if you've made backups, then certainly come along and have a look inside here and play. I'm going to take a look at it now because it actually does one or two things which are quite important and I want to explain to you. So if we click config, a load of files here that we can play around with. Apache's files, that one's for the secure server. The PHP ini file, that is one place that I might tell you to go and change one or two things if they're not working. And again, your PHP myadmin, if you suddenly get database issues, you'll probably come in here and start changing things. The one I'm interested in is Apache, the httpd.conf configuration file. We saw that service earlier. So if I click on it, it loads up now. Notice it loads up in Notepad because we told it to in our configuration. It's rather a large file full of probably absolutely nonsense to you at the moment. However, I'm going to go through a couple of things for you. Anything that, any line that starts with a hash symbol is a comment. It won't be executed. So you could delete them if you wanted to. I wouldn't because they contain useful information. The first thing I want to show you is this one, which is the first line, which is uncommented, and it's saying where is your server, where is your web server, and it's telling you it's in C, XAMPP, Apache. We've just seen that. So if we go back to Explorer, C, XAMPP, and then Apache, that is where all the program files for your web server are stored. Okay, close that one down here. So that's what it's telling it. It's telling it where Apache lives. The next thing I want to show you is this one, which is your port. Again, if Apache isn't working, maybe you can get into it here. There's many ways of getting into this file. I'll show you in a minute. it's telling it to listen on port 80. If you've changed your port and this one says port 81, you may have to come in here and change this value at some point to make it work. That tends to happen if you've got one or more web servers, so maybe you've got Windows version, IIS running, then you may be on port 81. Scrolling down a little bit more, I want to show you these files. These are all the modules that are loaded in. The uncommented ones are the ones that we've got. If you want to do some amazing things with your web server, then some of these modules, they're like little functions. You just uncomment it and it works when you restart your web server. One of the interesting ones is this one, vhosts. I use this one quite a lot, which gives me a lot of different named websites. At the moment, you've got one web server, one website. But by using this, you can have one web server with multiple websites, which is quite useful. And scrolling down, what I really want to look at is we're going to use quite a few of these in the future, is this one, directory index. I'm going to explain that in a second. I want to know where it is. What it's telling you is if you do not include a file name in your window, so if I choose localhost, if you do not choose a file name and just use directories, and we know dashboard is one of them, then it runs a particular file. It goes and it looks for a particular file. Now I can show you that. Let's go this way in. Local disk, xampp, htdocs. Here's where we are. In dashboard, I've got loads of files and folders in here, and this configuration file is telling me which file I should look for if I do not specify a file on here. Okay, so it goes through this list, and the first one it looks at is index.php. So if we go back to our file manager, we take a look down, do we have an index.php? We don't. The only PHP file we've got is PHP info. So it goes along, says, do we have an index.perl? No, we don't. Do we have an index.cgi? No, we don't. Do we have an index.asp? No, index.s. And in fact, that is the first file that we find in this folder, index.html. And that is the file that is loaded into the browser window. Obviously, if it doesn't find any, we get a different result. So I'm going to end it on that one. We don't really need to go through much more in here at the moment. We'll come to that later in the course when we want to do a few bits and pieces, probably play with the regular expressions. But for now, we'll move on.